to this morning's session. It's about privacy protection by the City of Calgary, City of Edmonton, and the City of Montreal, and the City of Vancouver.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can all see me and hear me. I'm in Montreal. I was hoping to be there in Victoria. I hear there's great energy and it's a great conference so far. So really excited about that. I'm just going to make a few comments. We're kind of doing like a self-moderating style and then we'll jump into the presentations. So in today's world, it can seem like your personal data is everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. When you sign up for a service, you give it away. It kind of circulates somewhere. Perhaps it's shared with a third party without your consent, and then you never see it again, or even the benefits that are derived from it. And I think as public administrations, we have the duty to do better. And actually, open data is already part of the solution in a digital world where we feel relatively powerless over our personal data. So for over a decade, Canadian cities have established open data programs to publish open data, to give it back to the community while also protecting privacy so that your data is protected, but it also becomes a shared and a collective resource that everyone can benefit from. So for today's discussion, we've brought together 4 major Canadian cities with the objective of sharing with you all how we protect privacy while also opening data. So to get things started off, I want to, of course, give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Volunteering myself to go first. My name is Miranda Sculthorpe. I'm an open data and data strategy advisor at the City of Montreal in the service of organizational performance and strategic planning. I'll also introduce Janusz Gawor. Unfortunately, he is not able to make it in person today with us. He's not feeling too well, but he did actually record his presentation beforehand. So Janusz is an open data strategist at the City of Calgary, and we're very happy to be presenting his presentation, which we'll get to later on. And I believe we should have Linda and Ian in the room in person. If you can both introduce yourselves and your cities, that would be great.
Good morning. Here we are. A little bit of an echo for hearing myself. My name is Ian. Thank you. Sound check. Give you a little sense of what that looks like at the City of Edmonton briefly. Linda?
Hi, my name is Linda Lowe, and I'm part of the Enterprise Data Analytic Division within Technology Services in City of Vancouver. I'm the coordinators for the City of Vancouver's Open Data Portal.
Thank you to you both. We're really happy to have you there in person, testing out this like hybrid way of working for the first time. So far, so good. So today we really wanted to have this discussion to demystify the process, because I think at first, if you think about these two concepts, personal data and open data, they're kind of things that don't or really shouldn't like coexist. But in fact, we've been opening data while protecting privacy for a number of years, and really going as far back as the beginning of the open data movement in 2010. So the question we're asking today is, how do we protect privacy while also sharing valuable granular data to the community in a complex municipal data environment? And I think this discussion is more timely than ever, considering how new technologies such as artificial intelligence are disrupting the scene and creating new risks around privacy protection, risks around potentially identifying persons and data. And so with this in mind, we wanted to show how our approaches and our policies are adapting to these risks. And throughout this session, really create a space for sharing and discussion continual improvement on a subject space that is evolving so quickly. So today we have our 4 cities, including myself. We're each going to present on our open data and privacy protection practices respectively, each doing about 10-minute presentations. And at the end, we'll hopefully have time for some questions. I'll be drawing some conclusions. So if you do have any questions, for those of you that are online, of course, feel free to put them in the chat in the Q&A section. Or if you are in the summit in person, be ready to ask your questions. As far as I understand, there should be facilitators in the room that will help you with that. Et si vous avez des questions en français, bien sûr, je serai heureuse de répondre à vos questions en français. So for my presentation, questions in French, I'll be happy to answer them in French as well. So as for our presentations, if we could start off with Janusz's presentation that he sent in, that would be great. And then I'll be going after that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great Canadian Open Data Summit. Thanks, Miranda, for the wonderful introduction. Once again, my name is Janusz Gawor, and I'm the Open Data Strategist here at the City of Calgary, where I've been in this role since about 2016. Before I kick off my presentation, I wanted to just share a few notes on this beautiful collaboration with these other rock stars that are sharing the stage. So back in 2017, we actually met at an Open Data Summit in Niagara, where we found that Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Montreal were meeting up regularly on a monthly basis to discuss strategy, policy, and some of the challenges with respect to open data. We were thus invited to join these monthly meetings, and hence Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg joined thereafter. And really honing on one of the presentations yesterday about external support and not reinventing the wheel, this is exactly what this is about. Having this wonderful collaboration with these teammates, it just means that we don't have to relearn the same lessons that others have already gone through. So in our presentations today, we'll talk about some of the similarities, differences in our policies, processes, and how we approach privacy and open data. I'll start off with a quick definition of open data. And so open data is really any public data that's shared with the public, as we know, and it comes without any warranties or obligations. And really, in its definition, having stuff openly shared just means there's less stuff, less information, less data to manage and protect. So right off the bat, open data it's important that privacy fits hand in glove. A little history on open data at the City of Calgary. So back in 2007, when Barack Obama kind of started the whole open government movement, many municipalities, states, countries followed suit. And similarly, in Calgary, a couple of councillors drafted a notice of motion to really make City of Calgary more open. And right in that memorandum, it was right from the onset we saw that there was a desire to share data openly for transparency and accountability reasons while respecting privacy and security concerns. A few years later, in 2014, Council, in collaboration with external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, released this digital strategy looking at ways that we could digitize government. Right off the bat there, some of the notes mention that privacy and security are not an afterthought. They're part of the design of this open government ecosystem. Fast forward to 2019, 2020, several different business units at the City of Calgary pulled together to really hone in and draft this privacy data practices. And it was really at this point in time, open data was essential to share with citizens, but duly noted, it was something that we wanted to make sure that no person's personal information was compromised. So a little bit more on this council and administration direction, which is privacy by design. You can go to the calgary.ca and learn more and read up more on these privacy data practices. But essentially, this privacy framework that was established really outlined some of the roles and responsibilities of various groups in the city of Calgary and various roles. And really, it was looking at a commitment by the city of Calgary to be compliant with the FOIP or Privacy Act. So council and administration was very determined that in essentially building these practices, it's privacy by design. Here's the landing page for our open data portal, City of Calgary's open data portal, and you can see highlighted down below in yellow, we have right on our web page, which is the privacy and policy and terms of use are highlighted, are shared. They're tightly intertwined. Privacy is not an afterthought. They're clearly embedded in the web page to ensure citizens and anyone browsing the web that they know that we follow the strictest security and privacy protocol before releasing and opening up any information for anyone to use. A little bit about our open government license. You may notice some differences from my colleagues on the stage. So the City of Calgary, back in 2016, also adopted the same license that the federal government, that the provincial government uses, which is the open government license. Like I said, why reinvent the wheel? Just use best practices out there. And hence we adopted this license to sort of align ourselves with the federal and provincial government. But excuse me, what I'd like to point out here is with respect to privacy, in our exemptions, it's clearly noted that any personal information, any user of open data does not have any rights to use that or any of the crests or names on the open data portal site. So our open government license, which is really a really open license, it just stipulates the fact that you can use the data any which way you want. It comes without warranties and obligations, but it does not give you the right to use any of the personal information. We have policies, open data policies. In our neck of the woods, they're administration policies rather than council-led policies. And we have this standard under the Information Management Security Policy, which is the Information Security Classification Standard, which ensures that any document, any image, any information must be classified. And with recent changes to the policy, it became unrestricted by default. So in essence, whereas in the past, people asked, why open data or why open information? Right now, the question being asked, why not open data? So different data stewards have to classify the records, and also they have to make sure that they have a good reason for not classifying information or data as confidential or restricted. And essentially, unrestricted data is anything that is not going to cause any reputational financial risks. And the higher up the pyramid you go, such as restricted, that's definitely something that would cause damage to either the city's reputation or finances, and etc. So in alignment with the city's policies, open data has a process that's established with privacy by design. Whenever we look at potential data to publish on the open data portal, security and privacy, as those arrows show, are top of mind. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, anything unrestricted is a great candidate for open data. Our publishing guide, which is a step-by-step guide for our data stewards to see if the data they want to share is a good candidate, also includes questions suggesting and asking whether the data stewards have connected with the Access and Privacy Office, and if there's any fields that need to be obfuscated, aggregated, etc. So right in our process, we have established security and privacy at top of mind. So let's talk about a couple of examples now in order to kind of make this a little bit more relatable. And in this example, let's look at community crime and disorder statistics. This is a map visual from our open data portal of basically a heat map of the crime statistics. So as we know, everyone has the right to information about their community in order to be more knowledgeable, in order to really assist with mitigation strategies. We can assist Calgary Police not in combating crime, but in being diligent and aware and reporting any sort of suspicious activities. And we worked on this data with Calgary Police Services for a number of years to get it right. We wanted, and police really wanted, to be able to share this data without compromising privacy and security. So as you can imagine, any crime incident would be reported at a particular location. Well, that kind of information cannot be shared because it can definitely compromise the privacy and security of the individuals. And hence, in this particular instance, police worked with the Access and Privacy Office in looking at ways that we could aggregate and share the data on open data without sacrificing and compromising that. And what was decided was to aggregate the data on a monthly basis. So what we were able to, and of course, anonymize, so no personal information would be shared. And so currently, how we share this data on the open data portal is that there's over 300 communities in the city of Calgary. And on a monthly basis, we get reports on the number of assaults, thefts, etc., that are aggregated at the community level. So they don't sacrifice or they anonymize and they aggregate and present this information. Thus, the public has access to the information without compromising security. Another quick example that I wanted to share is the census data. This is the civic census data, which unfortunately, after 2019, it was cut back. But up until that point, this was really critical and key information for people to really have an understanding about their community, really help with planning new communities, understand who's in that community, etc. And really helps counselors, it helps communities really understand how to best serve those citizens in those communities by understanding the demographics, the makeup of each community. And for sure, census is collected door to door, but before any of this information can be shared on open data, that data must be aggregated. It must, of course, be anonymized. And furthermore, in cases where there are less than 10 respondents to a question, that data then must be suppressed. So in this case, we worked with several groups in order to really aggregate this data at the ward and at the community level. And in doing so, we made sure that the data was aggregated, it was left out any personally identifying information, and any data that would show, say, less than 10 responses would be scrubbed because that could be potentially identifying. So this is just another example of how you can share data with the public without compromising security and privacy. So finally, I'll just wrap up by saying that what is open data? I like to think that open data is publicly shareable data to increase that public trust and confidence in government, and it is private, it is secure, and it's open by design. By putting stuff on the open data portal, we increase proactive disclosure and we increase internal efficiency while decreasing custom requests for FOIP, 301, and other routine data requests. If you want to learn more, please visit calgary.ca/data or email the open data team at opendata@calgary.ca. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Janusz. Again, we're so happy we got your contribution. We hope that you're feeling well. I'm just going to jump right into my presentation now, and I'm going to try to share my screen. Just give me a second. And I believe you should all be seeing my screen of my presentation. Setting up my notes. Okay, perfect. So I've already introduced myself, so I'm just going to jump right into the presentation. So the first part, I'm going over the different policies that altogether, I think, create the foundations for personal data protection at the City of Montreal. In the second part of my presentation, I'll be speaking a bit more practically. We'll look at some of the tools, some of the processes that we use to enable us to publish open data while protecting privacy. And in the third part of my presentation, we'll provide some specific examples of how we've applied anonymization techniques. So first, an important part of our data protection framework is our digital data charter. And a few years ago, recognizing that tools such as artificial intelligence was creating new risks to individual and collective rights, we wanted to make sure that data was being managed in a responsible way, which led to the publication of our digital data charter. And this was actually at a time where there was talk of renewing privacy protection legislation in Quebec. And the city actually published the charter in 2020, even before this legislation was updated. So this means we took a really strong stance early on, and we really made a commitment to protecting privacy in the digital age and promoting the use of data for the common good. So we're in the process of updating this digital data charter because we wanted it to be a living document that would respond to the rapid pace of change of technology. And so before us, we have the first version of the charter and its 13 principles. And I highlighted here a few principles that I think are really relevant to our discussion today. So first, we have the right to privacy, where we highlight the need to be vigilant about our use of technology in order to prevent any possibility of tracking or surveillance. We also have the principle of consent, to ensure that we obtain informed consent and that data is used only for the purpose for which it was collected. There's also the digital sobriety principle, which states that we apply data minimization strategies so that we only collect the personal information that is absolutely necessary to our service delivery. And so we have our digital data charter, but we also have, as I mentioned, updated privacy protection legislation in Quebec through Law 25, which actually was just implemented and came into effect this fall. So for those of you that are maybe familiar with GDPR in Europe, the Law 25 brings in similar privacy protection provisions. It adds stronger rules around informed consent. It also provides new obligations for organizations to ensure the better management of personal data. And at the City of Montreal, it's the clerk's office that is the body that's responsible for privacy protection. And the open data team actually works very closely with them. So for instance, if we ever have any questions about what data can and can't be shared, we are guided by the clerk's office, and it's actually the clerk's office that will make the final decision on what can or can't be released as open data. So we can't talk about open data without mentioning our open data policy. And since 2015, we've had an open data policy, which makes a commitment to open by default, unless there is a real justification as to why we cannot publish it. And this policy says that, of course, we do not publish personally identifiable information. However, and this is the part that we have highlighted in yellow on the screen, it says that if we can anonymize data and this anonymized data is still valuable to the community, we will publish it and we will take an engagement, a commitment to do so. So there's some different ways that we go about doing this anonymization. And as I mentioned, I'll get to some more specific examples later on. But I just wanted to start with these three pieces: our digital data charter, Law 25, and as well our updated open data policy, which you see here, which altogether create the foundations for strong privacy protection at the City of Montreal, while also making a commitment to sharing valuable granular data with the community through open data. So now I want to focus on a bit more practically speaking, how do we actually publish data while protecting privacy? And so before us, we have our open data pipeline, which actually breaks down the different steps of the publication process. So each data set will go through this pipeline, and it's really like each data set is treated as an individual case. So we really take the time to analyze the data, to understand its context, and then to apply the right anonymization technique if applicable. And of course, as you can see here, there's a bunch of loops, and that really just shows that there's multiple rounds of validation before it's actually being published. But actually what I want to emphasize the most here on this slide is on the left-hand side, you see the breakdown of the different parties who were involved in the process, and ultimately you see who is responsible for what part of the process. So for instance, you have STI, the Service de Technologie d'Information. So that's the IT service. And we work very closely with them to make sure that we're aligned with security practices. We also have la CREF, or the clerk in English, which I mentioned is involved for privacy protection expertise. There's La Géomatique that helps us to develop anonymization techniques. And so the lesson here is that data protection and open data, it requires a clear division of responsibility. And it also requires bringing in the right expertise at the right time. It's definitely a team sport. And along with our open data pipeline, another important working component of our process is the data catalog. So my team is responsible for maintaining the data catalog for the City of Montreal, which inventories all the data under the city's purview, not only open data, really all the data. And it classifies each data set into 3 levels of confidentiality, either open, restricted, or closed. And so this is our reference point that allows us to keep track of who has what data, what can or can't be published. And it's really important to have this piece that allows you to track every individual data set and where it is in the process. So not only do we have this data catalog, but we've also implemented a data governance program and a data governance directive, which lays out the roles and responsibility for data in the city and ensures that we have data coordinators and data stewards in place. And these resources are really key, again, to help us understand the context of the data and ultimately apply the appropriate data protection approach. So now that you have an idea of how we work to publish the data, I wanted to provide some specific examples of our anonymization techniques. And the first thing to understand is that there's a number of different techniques that can be applied. I'm not the particular expert on all of them, and I also don't have time to go through all of them. But what I did want to do is highlight a couple of neat examples where I think we've developed particularly innovative approaches in our anonymization techniques. And so the first project I wanted to talk about is the Montréal Trajet project, where participants were asked to download an app and log their trips either by foot or by bike around the city so that the city could better understand active mobility patterns. So of course, participants consented to participate in this study, and we commit to protecting their privacy. But we also wanted to find a way to share the results of the project with the community through open data. And so we applied an algorithm to mask the raw data to enable us to share the results. But actually, it's interesting because when we first published this data, there were some researchers that pointed out that there were maybe some flaws in our algorithm. And so we actually ended up working with those researchers from a university in Montreal called UQAM. And we collaborated with them, and they ultimately helped us to improve our anonymization technique by better masking the beginning and end points of the trip. And I think this is a really great example because it shows our openness. It shows that we recognize that we don't necessarily always have 100% of the answers, but we're willing to collaborate, particularly with experts, with academia, so that we can innovate and ultimately ensure that we apply the best anonymization techniques. Another example I wanted to share is the fire department interventions. And this is another case, again, where there's potentially sensitive information because in the raw data, we know the exact location of the event, of the fire, for instance. And so what this algorithm does, it takes the coordinates and reassigns it to the corner of the street or a mid-street segment. And similarly to the last example, this algorithm went through many rounds of testing, many rounds of improvement. So for instance, when we first applied the algorithm, we found an issue because the algorithm works by aggregating points in a zone. And in some cases, we saw it could be easy to re-identify a particular address if, for instance, there's only one house in an industrial area. So an improvement that we did is we established better criteria that said if there's only one house in one zone, that zone will then be expanded to then make it impossible to identify one particular address. And so again, this is an example where we're constantly looking to improve our anonymization techniques. And also I have links to all the cases and all of the documents that I've mentioned up until this point. If anyone is curious and wants to take a look, they'll be at the end of my presentation, and we'll be sure to share you with that. Sure to share you that those documents. So I covered a lot in my presentation, and so I wanted to finish with a few takeaways. The first, I think, that we've seen is that we're committed to making sure our policies, such as our digital data charter, strengthen privacy protection even before the adoption of Law 25. And in today's digital age, you really need to have these frameworks in place because they need to become the foundation of your process. We also saw how good documentation on strong data governance is really key to having a shared understanding of who is responsible for what data and what can or can't be published. We saw this as a team sport. It's about bringing in the right expertise at the right time. It's also a question of applying the right anonymization technique. And I think what's really key to our approach, again, is that we saw it's a question of testing, of improving, of maintaining a willingness to be challenged in our approach so that we can ultimately apply the best practices. And finally, transparency is key. We make it a point to document and share our methodology through open data. And through all this, I think it's really important just to remember to stay focused on the end goal, which is, of course, publishing granular, valuable data to the community while also protecting privacy. So thank you, everyone. Again, I'll be happy to take any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. And I believe now we are passing it over to Linda, who should be able to present in person. Thank you. Go for it, Linda.
Thank you, Miranda. So as mentioned, I was the coordinator for the cities of Vancouver's Open Data Program. And the Vancouver's Open Data Program officially started in 2009 when City Council passed a motion to promote the idea that government collected data should be made freely available for public use and analysis while respecting privacy and security concerns. The Open Data Catalog was launched later that year. Some of you might recall seeing this catalog list that was made up of HTML web pages. A major project took place in 2019 to eliminate many of the manual processes and to migrate all data sets from the legacy catalog to the open data portal you see on opendata.vancouver.ca. The new portal makes it easier for users to access, search, visualize, build maps and charts without having to leave the browser. Furthermore, users can query the data programmatically through application programming interface, APIs, or export the data to use with their own tool. Here's the dataset catalog where you can find a variety of datasets, such as the types of trees on public streets, orthophoto imageries, records of building permits, and business licenses that are issued by the city. Similar to City of Calgary, all our datasets on the Open Data Portal are published under the terms of the Open Government License Vancouver. There is a specific term prohibiting the use of personal information. In addition to that, there are several corporate policies that guide the handling of data, corporate records, and information. What you see here is the privacy policy. You can also find these policies online from the City of Vancouver website if you want to know more. For the Open Data Program, privacy review is also part of the dataset publication process. Dataset requests can come from filling out an online form on the Open Data Portal or by emailing the opendata@vancouver.ca. Requests can also come from internal departments or as one of the recommendations in a council report, for example. And after I've confirmed that the city is the custodian of the requested data, I'll work with the data steward, the staff who manages the data and knows the data best, to define the data scope and to understand known privacy issues. The dataset and attribute description will also get defined at that time. Then I'll work with the technical team to remediate identified issues to create a prototype dataset with relevant metadata information. The Access to Information and Privacy ATIP department will then review the prototype dataset with its metadata information to identify potential privacy concern within the dataset. They'll also look at the scenario if the data is to combine with other datasets from the city's open data portal, or to look at if it's combined with other sites online as well to see if there's any privacy concern. And if there is, the data steward will be involved and work with the technical team for remediation. Only after all the identified issues are resolved and there is green light from the final review with the ATIP department and the data steward, then the data set will be made available for public consumption. Here's a simplified technical view of the data publication process. We use SSIS or FME script to copy data from systems of records and apply any necessary transformation before storing the data in the staging environment of the open data portal. Of the open data warehouse. Because data in there might also have other uses such as internal data analysis, and I want to highlight that it's only the data that are classified by data steward as open, which is similar to City of Montreal that we have different classification as well. So only if the data steward has classified these data as open, then we'll get used to prepare for the prototype data set that I mentioned earlier. And only when we have the green light from the final review with the data steward and the ATIP departments, then we'll publish the data sets for public consumption. Today, I'll illustrate how we protect personal data using two of the data sets published in the City of Vancouver's open data portal. The first one is the business licenses data set. City of Vancouver issues about 50,000 business licenses every year. Any organization doing business in or from Vancouver require a license to operate. Only the applicants who complete all required steps gets to have a license issued to them. An applicant needs to renew the license each year by December 31st for the following year if they want to continue to operate. This ensures all business locations are safe and meet land use requirements. This is what a business license document looks like. This document was posted on this computer software development company's website, but you might also see a hard copy of a business license document posted inside a business, such as by a cash register in a restaurant in Vancouver, for example. Almost all the information you see in this document can be found in the business license dataset on the city's open data portal. And under section 22, 4I of the British Columbia's Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, FIPA, we're authorized to release the details of a license without unreasonably invading anybody's personal privacy. Oops, sorry. Sorry. Apparently I gotta, sorry. I don't know what happened there. I think that's it, okay. Sorry about that. So here's a snippet of the business license data set. The highlighted records are examples of where we have suppressed addresses. There are three ways we use in this data set to suppress address-related data to protect privacy. The first one is by license address type that are categorized as residential. We use view definitions to help remove all address-related data such as unit number and street address, but to keep country, province, city, and local planning area, which is almost like neighborhood data. This is to ensure that people can still do some analysis with the data set. The number two is by sensitive business license type. These are maintained in a separate lookup table, and we apply the same suppression strategy as the residential address type in number one. The third way is by specific license type. I'm using the example of short-term rental, STR. In Vancouver, residents are allowed to rent out their principal residence to earn additional income. It can be an entire home or a room in that home, but can only go back to my screen. Sorry, I can't go back to my screen now. It's right here, right? Okay, thanks. That's okay. This seems to have a mind of its own. I did resume, but it's not going. I don't know. This doesn't go with that anymore, seems like. Maybe try. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. So I was saying the STR, the short-term rental, it can only rent out for less than 30 consecutive days at a time. And operating, listing, or advertising a STR will require to display a business license. Violator may be fined if they're operating without a license, and the license may be suspended if they falsify information on the license application. Providing names of license holders in a searchable format is not a problem if the business is at an industrial or commercial building, but it's not okay to allow a person to be tracked down at the home address. And because STR can be operated from residential homes, therefore we also suppress business name and business trade name data, which often contain business owner name. The second example is a workforce pay rates and sex data set. This data set has been released for the purpose of transparency regarding pay rates at the City of Vancouver. It is a commitment under the city's women's equity strategy to measure and publicly report annually on the city's workforce composition and compensation. This data set provides the ranges of hourly rates of all city job classification and the staff count by gender within these classification during our initial publication. Pay ranges exist because each position belongs to a job classification with pay rate steps outlined in different collective agreements or the city's exempt compensation systems. After initial publication, we received feedback from data consumers about not having additional data to supplement job classification data. People who are reading the data stories or analysis, they don't know what job positions falls under these job classification. They can't relate to it because usually job titles is where they can see on the job postings. So they don't know the difference. For instance, what's you can't really see that well. The admin management 1A and admin management 5, for example. And it's not straightforward to find that information from the collective agreements. So publishing the corresponding position titles allows for granular analysis. However, we'll be publishing personal information about an identified individual if there's only one staff holding that particular position, for example. So after meetings with Human Resources Department, the Equity Office, and the ATIP Department, the recommendation was to only show sex breakdown and salary ranges for a classification or a specific position title when there are 10 or more people in that group. And with the help of using an aggregated query, here's how the enhanced data set looks like. We added position title attribute, so it's easy to understand classification and corresponding job titles. We implemented data category to indicate whether we use aggregation or suppression strategy to protect privacy while providing more granular data. We also corrected the data set name to reflect what we're posting in the data set. Data was republished under the new data structure, and data from subsequent years were added using the same structure to allow trend analysis. This concludes the 2 examples, and I'll pass the mic to Ian Gillis to give us the insights from City of Edmonton. Thank you.
Those lights are something else. Holy smokes. Gentleman behind stage, could you give me a hand PDF location? Legend. Thanks. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Yes, good morning. My name is Ian Gillis. I'm Open Data Analyst at the City of Edmonton. The City of Edmonton launched its Open Data platform in January of 2010. Our program actually predates the Open Government License and the Open Data Charter. The Citizen Dashboard, which is currently being reworked and rebranded as Open Performance, was launched in early 2013, and it's built on the same technology that powers our Open Data platform, that's Socrata. We developed the Open City Initiative, which is Edmonton's municipal perspective on the philosophy of open government, in June of 2014. The Open City Policy, which was enacted by Edmonton City Council the following year, 2015 also saw the creation of an Open Data Advisory Group, which comprised 1 representative from legal services, 1 from the privacy office, along with reps from each of our city departments. That process is still in place, and every data set that we release on the Open Data Portal gets reviewed by FOIP, that's Privacy, Legal, and now includes a review from our Data Ethics Advisor. In 2017, we released our formal open data strategy and adopted the International Open Data Charter. 2017 also saw the introduction of, I covered that, my apologies. Regarding some awards that we're pleased to talk about, we have been identified as the most open city by the Public Sector Digest each of the 5 times that think tank has released that index. And given that accessibility writ large is arguably our primary focus right now as an open data program, we're pleased to have been presented with the Canadian Open Data Accessibility Award in 2016 and last year, 2022. Today, we are currently in the process of refining our open data catalog while we still welcome new assets. And one thing that we're looking forward to is adopting the corporate city governance model that is currently under development by some of our colleagues. Our open city policy carries with it a bit of a tagline. That's open by default and protected by design. I took a bit of a different tack today, and I wanted to ask, what does the outcome of that design, reminding that design is always an active process, what does that look like today? So I've examined our practices and our catalog in light of the peer-reviewed paper, How to Protect Privacy in Open Data, which was published in Nature Human Behavior in 2022. Their recommendations to lower privacy risks are fortunately well known to us and my colleagues at other jurisdictions, and I've framed my examples within their list of best practices. I also have a QR code to access the short paper later. It's available through open access, so if you want to take that list back to your own programs and to identify your strengths and opportunities to improve, have your phones ready. So here is our high-level process for a new dataset release that goes through to publication. We receive a request from someone, it could be internal or external to the city, and we capture that request in a tracking system. We determine whether the city has and owns that data, and if so, we work with the business area to build out our ETL process and produce a private dataset. That private dataset is reviewed by us, the business or the data steward, our privacy, legal, and ethics advisors. Steps 2 and 3, source and review, are iterative. After that iterative process of checks and balances is complete, the dataset is ultimately published. And so with that quick overview, let's get to the list. Recommendation number 1, and these aren't in order in the source, they're just an unordered list. Number 1, clearly indicate to participants how privacy in data is to be protected and always obtain informed consent for sharing data. the City of Edmonton's open data process, starting with our request phase, we have this FOIP statement, and you'll see this on all of our forms at the City of Edmonton, where we explicitly get consent for user data when we process the request, and we're very clear and explicit about where and how that data is used. Next recommendation, ask a trusted colleague or co-author to consider privacy risks before opening up the data. Our trusted colleagues are many. Meet the Open Data, it's not a catchy name, the Open Data Portal Internal Data Portal Working Group. We meet on a 3-week cycle just to be respectful of people's time. Our legal advisors help us answer the question, are there contractual reasons that we cannot release this data, including intellectual property rights, restrictions on use, whether by purpose or audience, and do we own the data? Our ethics advisor helps us answer questions like, should we release this data? If we do release this data, what are some of the potential undesirable side effects, and how can we mitigate against them? And our privacy officers help us to define and identify personal information, because that isn't always immediately clear to us. They help us to identify risks, often drawn from precedents and their expertise, of combining seemingly innocuous bits of data to identify an individual, and to provide and evaluate ways, both procedural and technical, that we can address those concerns. As with any large enterprise, the city collects and generates huge amounts of diverse data in the course of providing its diverse services. Information sharing is a key component of operational efficiency, and so we have the internal data portal. The variety of kinds of data and being a service-oriented business whose customers, that is citizens, relates to the city as an organization and as a place means that different publishing mechanisms are required to best serve the widest number of customers. Place-related and place-dependent queries are often best served by maps and location-aware tools, and not all data is suitable for release for a variety of reasons under the Open Government License. The situation is complex, and the Open Data team is connected to all of these groups and processes, facilitating communication, we hope effectively and efficiently, rather like transportation networks rely on hubs. And we act between these different groups, implementing technical changes required to ensure that we meet our commitments to be both capital O open while meeting our diverse obligations as custodians of valuable and often sensitive information. Next recommendation, carefully consider rich, qualitative, that is text data or recordings for identifying information and safely store these. When we publish results of surveys run by our corporate research office to the Open Data Portal, municipal census data, 311 data sets, and the open data set requests themselves, free text fields are removed just as a matter of course before we publish to the Open Data Portal. Next up, avoid collecting direct identifiers that are not necessary for the study, because you can't leak what you don't have. Statistics Canada already does a really good job of withholding information following best privacy practices, so we take some cues from them. I'm pleased to report that our corporate research team has just changed their practice, and they now only collect forward sortation area instead of a full postal code. It saves a step for us. This also extends to the Open Data Portal overall, like no log isn't required. API keys aren't even needed for most programmatic, even pretty high load use. And on our new dataset request form, we collect only a name and email address so that we can reach the requester as we process the request and we know what to call them. Next recommendation, remove shared data indirect identifiers that can be linked for triangulation. In addition to surveys and 311 requests, we maintain a record of infill compliance inspections. In this process, applicant address information is removed during our transform step of the extract transform load process. And furthermore, the permit number, which is personally identifiable, is transformed into unique identifiers, allowing them to serve strictly as a row ID. That recommendation continues. Ensure that indirect identifiers cannot be cross-referenced by delinking files. In this case, we use a custom FME transformer that packages up some magic numbers and modular arithmetic in this case, and then we can reuse that vetted transformer across multiple jobs to fulfill a similar function. Next recommendation is to use pseudonymization, encryption, and safe storage when direct identification is truly needed. In our micromobility trips data set, We use a salted, cryptographically secure hashing algorithm to produce unique identifiers from the trip IDs that are provided to us by our vendor partners. That raw data is available to internal employees who need it under additional checks and balances when they need it to actually perform their duties. Final recommendation is to shuffle some data if needed to ensure privacy or use differential privacy methods to do so. In that same micromobility trips data set, we reduced the published precision by both time and space using building on actually work that the City of Calgary had done with their micromobility project and also Louisville Metro. And we also filter out isolates to prevent reuse and re-identification even after that kind of roll up and anonymization has taken place. Just the last couple of recommendations here from the publication. Just in the interest of time, I won't read them. There's the QR code to the paper if you want it to take home with you. Vickers et al., Human Nature 2022, based out of the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, and that is available under an open access license. Yay, open access. So I was quite pleased to see recent coverage of this important topic in the peer-reviewed literature, and I was pleased to learn that we at the City of Edmonton and my colleagues at other jurisdictions are already following a lot of these best practices as a matter of course. And with that, I think we'll go back to Miranda to close us off. Miranda in Montreal.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Linda, Ian, Janusz, amazing, insightful presentations. I hope we were able to kind of demystify the process a bit, show the work that we do behind the scenes to be protecting your privacy while also opening data. I have some concluding comments, but I really would be interested to hear if anyone has any questions, anyone from the audience online or in person. I think that would be my priority, is to hear from all of you, if anyone had anything, reflections on what we shared today. Not seeing anything as far as I can tell. If anyone has any questions, we Okay, unless someone interrupt me if there are questions in the room. We're really hoping to hear from all of you. I think what we'll be doing is we'll be sharing our slides with everyone, and I think we all have our contact information at the end of our slides. If not, you can write to us. We'll be in the summit for those of you that are in person. Linda and Ian are going to be there in person. You can also, if you want to talk to someone from the City of Montreal, there's Philippe Faltin, who is also there in person. So I think we can wrap it up there. Again, I was really hoping to get at least one question. But as I said, oh, okay, I'm hearing we have a question. There is just maybe a bit of a technical issue. Maybe someone in the room.